Yeah, done with my Oreo.
Okay, good. Do we really know what happened? The brother did.
The brother, that's what I thought too.
I mean, that seems like kind of obvious. Hey, do you want to talk about death?
Yeah. I mean,
Murdery thingy.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to our new mic.
Oh yeah, we got a new mic.
So hopefully this sounds better.
Not gonna lie, when we played it back, it sounded exactly the same. But I also am not the person to be the judge of that
It was
either.
also still playing through my phone.
Right.
So I don't know. I'll see. I mean, I wanted to at least get a mic, But I mean, we don't need to go into like the whole story. But our first attempt at a mic ended in a very sad manner because it stopped working for some reason. I never figured it out why, but anyway,
We're past it.
It's water under the bridge. So
We're
I got
new
one.
people.
Right. I got one that just plugs right into the phone.
All
so
right.
much more convenienter. So.
All right, let's do this.
Yeah, welcome to Mystery Murdery Thingy.
My name is Chloe.
My name is Mario.
Doom, 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 doom. Keep talking.
Dun.
Doom, doom,
Oh, I'm
doom,
just keep talking.
doom,
I did that song in pep bands.
Really?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do it in like an a cappella choir.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah.
That song and the Trash in the Camp from Tarzan.
Oh yeah. We watched that together, right?
Tarzan?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. I've seen it many times.
I think I only saw it that one time when I watched it with you. There's like some certain Disney movies I just haven't seen randomly. I don't know why. Anyway. Anywho.
Moving on.
Yes. So I'm gonna go first this week.
Yeah. Mario's doing.
Decided.
We're both doing part twos.
Exactly. Our parts 2 of the two-parters, which we began last week.
We've got a kind of some very contrasting.
Yes.
End of the spectrum stories.
This is Mystery Murdery Thing.
You get it all.
We could be doing anything at
get
any
it
time.
All.
Week to week.
Any mystery.
Anything that's a mystery.
What if one day we did mundane mysteries? Like,
mundane
where
mysteries.
did my red sock go?
Right.
Who knows?
Why are the countries named? Why are the states the shapes they are?
Oh.
It's not really a mystery, but just because you've never looked it up because it's fucking boring as shit. I just remember hearing that during like a, it was like some episode of something on like the History Channel or something. I think that was a History Channel show, like why the states are the shapes they are. That's some nerdy shit. Nerd alert.
You said your boss said that to you, right?
My supervisor, yeah. in a nice way.
That's cute.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Okay, so we gotta take it down a little, okay? We gotta get serious. Because this is a very important topic.
Yes. And I want to handle it the right way. I think in doing I think we were both a little bit reticent for me to do this topic because it's so big, it's so important, it's something that's like of this moment in a way, but also of like every moment of the past like 500 years in a sense too. Like it involves all of this history, but it's also very current and I think it's also very, very important, like we were saying. And that's also why I wanted to devote 2 full episodes to it because and of course we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
Yes, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, go back.
Exactly, yeah. Listen to that. In the first episode, in part 1, you'll get a sense of who the women are, how many, why we don't really know. I talk about a few of the cases and, just the topic in general in terms of the people involved. And in episode 2, we're going to really dive into why these mysteries exist. Some of it. Because, honestly, this could be a whole set of episodes in and of itself of why.
Yeah, we said it could... you tweeted about a podcast.
Yes.
That was just all about...
just about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And I think it's actually not the only one. I came across another one, I think. And the one I found initially, it's from like 2017. I'll keep tweeting out stuff about this because there are more reports It's just there's
It's something
so
that's
much out
always
there.
evolving.
Exactly.
These cases.
And it's something that finally authorities and people and the media are like starting to pick up on
Not
and
as much
focus on,
as
but
they should, but
not nearly as much as they should, but more than nothing, which is
yes.
what's been happening for a really long time. So yeah, we're just gonna really dig into this whole question of has this been happening for so long to so many people? Essentially the question of how could a set of so many and so tragic of crimes have gone unnoticed for so long by so many in our society. It's that in and of itself is a mystery. You would think that when this many crimes of this magnitude occur, there would be a sense of crisis in the country.
Yeah.
When it's this prevalent among a certain set of victims, but that's not the case. That has not absolutely not been the case for so long, and even now, even with renewed or the first kind of interest in this as a topic among so many people, it still is very, very limited. Um, and this question of why is really a mystery in and of itself within this wider universe of mysteries. But this question of why and the factors that lead us to sort of come to an answer of why are also themselves a powerful engine of mysteries. It's sort of a self-fulfilling cycle of creating these mysteries because again, these are largely man-made mysteries. These are largely official mysteries, and we'll
Yes.
dig into that
Yes.
really in detail here. So it really comes down to the erasure of trauma and victimization that this particular set of victims, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, um, there are a lot of sources and consequences to these crimes. And we're not going to get into every single thing having to do with this. It's just too much. So I'm going to kind of try to organize it around three main categories, which are kind of a little bit squishy, right? A little bit ill-defined. Official sources, cultural factors, and awareness.
Okay.
And I'll define each of those kind of as we go here, because I'm using each of those in kind of a specific way. So the first and the most central in my mind set of factors leading to these mysteries are, of course, official sources. This category includes things like the limitations of official record keeping. And if you listen to part one, you'll recall that I said that even in the era of digitization, there are still some profound limitations to
Yes.
the way in which data is recorded
There's lots of
stored.
information that should be there that isn't.
Exactly, like the UIHI report, investigators and so many others who've delved into this kind of university of mysteries. Researchers have learned that the data to truly know that should be there to truly know, basic facts about who these women are, how many there are. It's simply not there. The people who should have collected it, whose responsibility it was to do that, did not do it or they did it poorly, so that data is mischaracterized, and it's extremely hard to pick through that, in these huge sets of data, in these like huge, national databases where, they just didn't account for these people, like literally they didn't account for them.
Right. It's a national problem.
Yes, it's a local problem, a regional problem, and a national problem. There are failures on every level when it comes to these victims. And even, for example, in the districts that collect crime statistics on missing and murdered women, which is not every single district, and the reporting of those data is also not mandatory, um, for the most part. Although, I mean, there are some specific rules, like in the Violence Against Women Act that got reauthorized in 2013 and just recently, but there are holes, in these data, and part of the reason why is because these systems are not consistent or compatible in the way in which they encode Native American identity. There's basically no way in which to enter in Native American or Indigenous or a particular tribal identity. It literally does not exist in the program that they use.
So somebody could have like a name in there, but you wouldn't know if they were Indigenous?
Not
Is that the
necessarily.
problem?
Exactly, because some people have an indigenous sounding name and other indigenous don't have an indigenous sounding name. So,
Yeah.
like, it's not a. And, furthermore, it's not only that, but there's, like, these marks of, like, this pernicious racism amongst the people that obviously created these programs. Like, for example, the marking of N next to a name didn't mean Native American. Up until at least the 1980s, it simply referred to, quote, Negroes, unquote. That's literally what the, like, official documentation was. Um, so,
But
yeah. People thought
wait.
that might have meant Native American or indigenous,
Oh, but
it did not. So that sort of threw investigators. So it's these kind of things that put
uh,
roadblocks, these and disheartening roadblocks. Is like, oh, that's what it is. Oh my God, amongst all these official records up until basically 30 years ago, within my lifetime.
it's messed up.
Yeah. Um, and the UIHI investigators were also given data that clearly included people who were Indian, like in the sense that their ancestry was from the South Asian nation, not Native American, right?
Oh.
Which
And
is
that
this
stems from our own American stupidity
this
than
whole
anything else.
misunderstanding by Christopher Columbus and other explorers that they had somehow reached the other side of the world and were in the so-called West Indies. That whole cultural misunderstanding has propagated all the way up until now and
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah.
Which is why I never use Indian to refer to a Native American person,
Yeah.
even though in official documentation sometimes, and even amongst Native Americans, it's used because it's propagated. But it's just this. It's a really good reminder that a cultural misunderstanding has real life consequences.
Yes.
It's not just a stupid misunderstanding. It's not just an accident of history. It actually affects real people's lives in real ways. And, like, this is an example of that.
Yeah.
So, furthermore, even when the authorities were confronted with these inconsistencies in the data, right, the government officials simply gave them a very similar list and gave them this sort of implausible explanation that, oh, those people that you're talking about that you're saying are Indian, right, from India, some of whom had names like Singh and, like, clearly South Asian Indian names, that, oh, they must presumably have been biracially Native American, and that's why they're in there. That's what the authorities
They just
said.
like
They tried to
threw
sort of,
that
like,
out there?
yeah, with no evidence or anything. So yeah, it's not there's some of these specific examples that paint the authorities in very, very poor light.
Well,
in terms of
it's got to stem from somewhere, right?
Exactly. People not doing their jobs, right, at some level. So these kind of errors and gaps in the data, and in data collection are really emblematic of a general attitude toward the trauma and the well-being of these indigenous peoples. Their experience is erased, subsumed within the official collections. Another example is that in a lot of systems, if there was no indication of racial identity, it defaulted to white. So the person could have been of any ethnic background, whatever, but if they didn't know for sure, it just defaulted to white. So it's literally the erasure and subsumation of their cultural identity.
If only race wasn't like such an option.
I know, right?
Race
is a
for
very
identifying
complicated,
people.
Yeah. True, and it's like in some sense you think, well, they just shouldn't track it because it just doesn't even matter, right? It's just a silly concept in and of itself. But the issue with that is the violence that and the disparate treatment that those people suffer from can't then be tracked properly and known about and therefore properly dealt with because you're not tracking it. So it's sort of
there would be a lack
sword.
of awareness.
Exactly. So there is that sort of John Robertsian argument of, oh, if you don't want to discriminate against race, then just don't talk about race. But it kind of doesn't work that way. It's a little bit naive in terms of how the world actually works. So yeah, I think also it's important just to understand that these issues didn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why, I mean, both of us were saying this. That's why it's frustrating.
Extremely frustrating.
It's like all so preventable.
Yes, yeah, very preventable. because we know this because data about quote unquote white Americans is properly collected much more often, and their cases do get much more consistently investigated, and justice in many more cases is served. Like you can see that this parallel disparity exists where data collection and the outcomes both are disparate, and it's not a coincidence that that's the case, right? Clearly there is some kind of connection here. And even when indigenous women and girls crimes are captured in official data, those data never, to my understanding, include tribal identities. So tribal nations are not ever informed that their citizens are involved in these violent crimes, which is something that we regularly
Why?
do as a courtesy for foreign nations. You know, if a person from the UK were to come here and get murdered, as a matter of course, we would notify that other nation. We don't do that with tribal nations. Why? It doesn't make any sense. So these issues kind of they lead us into another yeah, that's what I was just about to get to actually. So into these issues of jurisdiction and sovereignty. This is another category of the official sources of these mysteries. So the issue of which law enforcement agency has jurisdiction and what the implications of tribal sovereignty are is a large complicating factor in creating these mysteries amongst the missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. So yes, let's unpack this term a little bit of tribal sovereignty,
Yeah.
right? So you may have heard this term before, tribal sovereignty. What does that mean? So whether and to what extent a particular tribal nation is sovereign has changed since our founding, sort of continuously, and it's fairly complex. Before the American Revolution, the rebels that would, of course, eventually become our founding fathers fought with and against various tribal groups. So
Okay.
it's to just so you
In and of
understand
itself, it's
it
complex.
exactly. It started out in a very complex way. Some of the tribal nations and etc. were allied with various of the nations, including with the rebel Americans. Um, when our country officially actually began, these indigenous peoples still had held sway over much of what would later become the United States, and they were recognized as sovereign nations, um, to some extent. Some of them were, and eventually, though all of their land was essentially either surrounded by or subsumed into the United States of America, right? And of course, as we all know, the history between Native Americans and the men, the European nations, and then the United States,
It's pretty
it's
peaceful.
it's pretty horrific. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's
it's
actually
exactly what you
pretty.
see on
It's
movies about the
yeah.
Thanksgiving. No, it's not that at all. It's
It's
genocide,
absolutely
forced
terrible.
marches, internment camps, forced labor, every horrible, horrific crime against humanity you can possibly imagine. You know, any of those groups, including the United States, definitely inflicted upon Native Americans. And of course, the Canadian government is should be held to account for its own atrocities as well. So yes, let's just understand the context in which we're working here, right? And also just to clarify and to understand that the issue of missing and murdered women and girls, indigenous women and girls, extends as far back as the first contact between the wider world and Native Americans. Like this set of victims has been victimized fairly continuously or essentially continuously for the past 500 plus years. So just to understand this has a long, long tail.
You kind of think of it as like indigenous peoples as a whole, but when you look at women and children, the numbers go straight up.
Yeah, exactly. They're way way over represented in the sample, and a lot of this stems from a set of factors that eventually lead back to the trauma of colonialization. That's clearly where a lot of this is coming from. including the factors that we're talking about, today in a more modern context. So, yeah, legally, constitutionally, some of these indigenous governments were and currently are recognized as sovereign nations. But again, it's complicated. Like, it would take so long to explain the ins and outs of, the different eras of how that worked and different Supreme Court decisions and legal opinions. It goes on and on and on. But just to know that they are technically, some of them, considered sovereign nations within the United States, right? Their sovereignty allows them to do things like, for example, have gambling operations on their lands.
Mm.
That's why they're allowed to do that, because they get to decide what are the laws within their country. But more pertinently for our discussion today, it also profoundly, their sovereignty profoundly problematizes the question of justice for those people on tribal lands who are victims, and those people with tribal affiliations who are victims or perpetrators, wherever they are. Just like the UIHI report, put there, it's over 70% of indigenous Americans live in cities. So what's the course of action for them? Yeah, I wanted to read kind of a quote here from the AP story about this. Tribal police and investigators form the Federal Bureau of Indian Affairs, but the FBI investigates certain offenses, and if there's ample evidence, the U.S. Department of Justice prosecutes major felonies such as murder, kidnapping, and rape if they happen on tribal lands. So, who is in charge it kind of depends on what kind of offense we're talking about, right?
So does that?
Yeah, so it's complicated. And what to do, in any of those instances is very complicated. It's a sort of
It's just a
Kafkaesque,
subjective type
bureaucracy.
of judgment.
Yeah, and if you're the victim, in addition to dealing with the trauma, you also have to deal with this whole system of trying to get justice from these different interlocking authorities. So let me read another kind of a extended quote from that AP story that kind of illustrates this point. Former North Dakota federal prosecutor Tim Purdon calls it a, quote, jurisdictional thicket, close quote, of overlapping authority.
A lot of red tape.
Yeah, and different laws depending on the crime, where it occurred, on a reservation or not,
God.
and whether a tribal member is victim or perpetrator. Missing person cases on reservations can be especially tricky. Some people run away, but if a crime is suspected, it's difficult to know how to help. Where do I go to file a missing persons report? Purdon asks. Do I go to the tribal police? In some places, they're underfunded and undertrained. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, the FBI, they might want to help, but a missing person case without more is not a crime, so they may not be able to open an investigation. Do I go to one of the county sheriffs? If that sounds like a horribly complicated mishmash of law enforcement jurisdictions, that would tremendously complicate how I would try to find help. It's because that's what it is.
And
close quote.
That makes people not want to seek help. It
Yes.
reminds me of the problem of women not reporting, or anybody not reporting sexual assault, and how it's just very underreported. It's because it's
Right.
the process itself is also complicated, not to mention the type of judgment and the type of anxiety and the type of trauma that goes along with that process.
And that's definitely a part of what I read in respect to the attempts to get some kind of like compensation, or there's a sort of Truth and Reconciliation Commission going on in Canada, but people describe the process through which they're trying to get some form of restitution as just more trauma, essentially.
Yeah.
Without any clear path to real justice or real sense of, some kind of restitution or closure. So it's very, very hard. Yeah. So these kind of structural issues are definitely a key factor in understanding the official sources of these mysteries, but they also interact and intersect strongly with the next category, okay? Cultural factors, so called, right? And by cultural factors, of course, I mainly mean racism, because that's the main cultural factor that leads to these kind of mysteries in that respect. Most critically, this and this is kind of where it intersects with the official sources, includes the racism of certain members of law enforcement, right?
Yep.
Who, whether consciously or not, have kind of bought into this long discredited notion of some kind of racial hierarchy, right? So-called white supremacy, which, as we were kind of mentioning earlier, if you want to talk about bad science, pseudoscience, there's a lot of that around racism. It's just like so much historically all the way through to today.
Pseudoscience?
Yeah, pseudoscience, like the science so called behind like Joseph Mengele's experiments and
Oh, I
what do you
understand.
call it um where they would like basically breed people for certain traits.
Human trafficking? Oh.
Eugenics, yeah,
Eugenics, yeah.
eugenics, things like that. Like, it just breeds these kind of like, again, pseudosciences. Like they're not based on real scientific thinking or anything of the kind. Um, okay, so to to kind of get back on track a little bit here, so let's make this a little bit more concrete and specific in terms of how this racist attitude impedes proper investigations and helps to, again, create these mysteries. Again, we're trying to answer this question of why do these mysteries exist. Law enforcement, especially in historically underserved communities like Native American communities, indigenous communities, has to make tough choices all the time. As we mentioned earlier, some of these indigenous police forces are severely underfunded.
Yes.
So not all crimes can be prosecuted or investigated. Choices have to be made by prosecutors, by investigators. In that
And that's a whole
environment,
other problem, like in and of
oh yeah,
itself.
that's a whole separate issue that
Yeah.
exists totally apart from this, but it's just a reality almost always. So in that environment though, a factor like being part of a disfavored group, like a indigenous woman or girl, can be critical. And again, just for clarity, I'm saying disfavored by the system, not disfavored by any particular person per se.
Okay.
Especially in reference to cases of murdered or missing persons, because the first few hours and days are so critical.
Yeah.
And these kind of factors, the indifference that kind of racist attitude breeds, disallows proper investigations from occurring in those critical hours. And that makes essentially the difference in a lot of cases. But racism doesn't only stem from, implicit bias, structural racism, things like that, sins of omission, essentially. Authorities also regularly take proactive actions that undermine proper investigations and the pursuit of justice for these victims, these women and girls. Authorities will, for example, regularly demean or diminish the seriousness of potential crimes as some,
They
form
just
of
kind of brush it
excuse or
off.
something. Yeah, exactly. They'll say things like, these women and girls most probably aren't missing, weren't murdered, but they've simply, quote, run away or gone drinking or taken up with some guy. There's sort of an intersection of misogyny and racism that creates an environment that is so toxic to the proper administration of justice, and devoid of any humanity, or care for these victims. It's just this total antithesis of what a proper investigator should, um, should what their attitude should be, what their mindset should be. And again, that's why this happens. That's why mysteries persist. That attitude creates an environment in which proper investigation is not done, and therefore we don't get the facts, and therefore justice is not served. Like, it's a direct line from these racist attitudes that some people dismiss as like, oh, they're just what's in their heart. They just say racist
That
things.
doesn't make
Well,
any
saying and
sense.
doing racist things have real consequences for real people. You know. So it's not just words. It's not just an attitude. It's not doing your job correctly in some cases. So anyway, and again, I think at this point, since we've been kind of bashing on the police a lot, we should probably say again, just for clarity, this does not mean everyone.
Well, I mean,
There
obviously.
are, well, sure, but there I think it's important to again give proper context. This is not true of all investigators. There are some people who have done heroic, valiant work for these women and girls among the investigatory community. But their valiant efforts have not been able to change the structural issues. it's bigger than any single investigator or set of investigators. It's about the wider law enforcement community, and you know, there has to be a large scale change, a sea change, a cultural change in terms of how these are cases are approached, and there are legal efforts that are underway nationally. We talked about that a little bit in the last episode in reference to Savannah's Act, being championed by mainly Heidi Heitkamp, but other senators as well, including Lisa Murkowski, I believe, and of course in some states as well. To do things like improving data collection and improving, the kind of structural issues that we're talking about today. But of course, we need to be clear-eyed when we're talking about that as well, right? Like Anita Lucchese, a researcher, I believe she was involved in the UIHI report, she's sort of skeptical of these legal efforts. She said, quote, "I don't think you can fix problems that have been created by poor legislation with more legislation, rooted in the same way of knowing and in the same culture."
So then how do you fix it? Do you fix it?
It's a difficult issue, but
I guess that's the question, right?
right, exactly. And that point of view, that sort of maybe a bit cynical point of view, is, I think, though, sort of eminently understandable, right? Even when investigations have been attempted, even when laws have been passed, they usually haven't made really any headway with the particular cases themselves that they try to reinvestigate, or in bringing real awareness to the issue.
I think it, at the core of it, and it's like rough to really say this and like realize it, but people don't care. Like, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And like,
Yeah,
it happens that way for a reason.
exactly. I mean, I think I have almost that same sentence like toward the end of my write-up. But no, it's true. Like, you really, if you look into this enough, you just really get that sense that, like, people don't care. Like, this erasure, dismissal, diminishment of this issue, it really it extends to everyone, essentially. Like,
Yeah.
yes, it extends far beyond just legal authorities. This universe of mysteries exists in some part by mutual consensus of our culture. That's kind of the conclusion that I came to. When the missing and the dead are counted in official records and in the vast amount of media, Indigenous women and girls are essentially largely ignored, misrepresented if they are there at all. And how often, I think, just ask yourself a few questions, right? How often are cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls discussed on the nightly news, or cable
Right.
TV, or true crime podcasts, or procedural dramas? How many times have you seen it? I mean, think about it. Really, think about it. I can't think of a single one.
There was one Criminal Minds episode kind of alluding to it.
And I watched a shit ton of Law and Order.
And Criminal Minds is his hundreds of episodes.
Yes. So just think about that, and then think about the statistics that we've spoken about, and I'll give a little bit more toward the end just to hammer the point home, right? But it's weird. Like, if you really think about it, why? Why is that? Because it doesn't make any sense. How many of these cases, as a partly a consequence of that, can you name off the top of your head? I mean, now I can name a few because I've been looking into this over the past couple of weeks, right? But not even that many. And I would challenge any just person on the street to name a single one.
Nobody
They
would be able
clearly
to.
could not.
You'd have
Clearly
to
they
you
could
would have
not.
to coincidentally catch some kind of expert, like,
Right.
journalist who happens to be working on this right now or
Yeah.
something like that.
It essentially, this issue has no salience in the wider culture. And there's a reason for that. It's not an accident. It's exactly what you said a minute ago, because not enough people care enough. Not enough people care enough. Cultural representation is a way of society essentially saying, these people matter. They're part of our collective story. And that makes a real difference. For example, I'm going to read a quote here by Carolyn DeFord. She's the daughter of a missing Indigenous woman named Leona LeClaire Kinsey. But her mom went missing many years ago. But Carolyn eloquently summed up the issue this way. There's a little bit of justice in the acknowledgement that there's an injustice. It's a slow
Right.
boat to turn around because it's a 500-year-old problem.
Yeah.
And when I read
Yeah.
that, it's
That
what
she
reminded
put
me to
it
talk about that.
perfectly.
Exactly. It's a 500-year-old problem. It's not only something that's been happening since 2010, even though that's when we know about most of the cases. It's not only something that's been happening since the 19th century, just because you think of, so-called cowboys and Indians from then.
Yeah.
It's not just from the Revolutionary War. It actually extends further back than that
Yeah.
to pre-America. So this is an incredibly large issue, universe of mysteries, again, that we're talking about here. So these, cultural issues, these official sources, they are sort of tied up in and are fed by the incompetence, the malevolence, the cultural erasure, the underrepresentation present within the law enforcement community, the media, the wider cultural in the United States and Canada. um, but all of this really boils down to something more personal: awareness. Awareness, as I'm using it, implicates all of us. It's the salience of these victims and their communities in your life, in my life, in all of
Right.
our
Right.
lives.
We've said this. Yes.
Exactly. This is reiteration, right? But this is, um, if I can, a kind of implication of each of us, right, to do better with this. Because unlike the first two factors, official sources, cultural factors, we can't really do too much about that as individuals, but this we can do something about. When you're
Right.
learning about true crime, seek out these victims. If you have a platform, speak about these victims. If you're an investigator, try harder to investigate these
Right.
crimes.
I feel like awareness is the place to start. Because
Yes.
here we are, the two of us, just like random people in the middle of, the country.
Right.
What can we do? And that's, yeah.
This is it's exactly. This is what we can do, so this is what we are doing. Um, so yeah, let's not forget that that there's a reason why we focus on these victims as well. Um, I'm just gonna give a little bit more statistics here from a Intercept article that I read. So, according to the results of the 2010 National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, 84% of Indigenous women interviewed had experienced violence in their life.
Well, wait,
56,
wait, say that again.
84% of Indigenous women interviewed had experienced violence in their life.
Wow.
Yeah. 56% had experienced sexual violence. According to data collected between 1992 and 2001, American Indians were twice as likely as any other racial group to be raped or sexually assaulted.
And those are just the people that spoke up.
Right, right. As with all of these statistics and numbers, they are almost certainly underrepresentations themselves, for all of the reasons that we've spoken about, right? A study of American Indian causes of death between 1999 and 2009 found Indigenous women had a homicide rate 3 times that of white women. And an analysis of data.
Why?
Exactly.
And I
And
mean, I know we've talked about like not reporting it and this, that, and the other thing, but
well, the main, I guess,
why is that
reason.
crime there in the first place?
Right, right. They're bound together. Well, that's the best explanation that I read, at least, because when crimes are known to be under prosecuted, then those victims are more vulnerable, and therefore victimizers and predators will seek out those
Oh,
victims.
I
So
understand.
it's a self-fulfilling cycle here in a way, right? And this is really graphically demonstrated by a case like Robert Picton,
Ew.
you know, among whose victims Indigenous women are grossly overrepresented,
Yeah.
as with the Highway of Tears, right? And so many other victim data sets that include these women and girls. Um, but it's very explicit with Robert Picton. I mean, we know now that that's what was going on for sure. And the authorities, and of course his case, were particularly pernicious. So if you want a real good example of how everything can go wrong in things like this having to do with missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, look into the Robert Pickton
Looked
case.
at that case. It's
I didn't talk about it just because it's too much to get into.
yeah.
I didn't even think I was going to
yeah.
mention it, but just because it's such a good example, like, look into it. So all of this comes down to we all need to do more work for these victims. Because, while official sources and cultural factors create these mysteries and hamper us in terms of our understanding and awareness, it is our responsibility to increase our measure of empathy, right? As we're always trying to do here, and understanding for these victims, these women and girls, through our personal awareness that we do have, some control over. And another quote I wanted to read, a March leader for the May 5th, 2018 National Day of Awareness for missing and murdered Native American women and girls, Roxanne White, kind of summed things up this way. We're the only ones that are going to speak for them. It's not going to be the president or the governor. We have to be the ones to come out and demand justice, demand the police, when somebody goes missing, to do their damn job, hold them accountable. That's the only way it's going to happen. And we know this works. Like with the podcast, Who Killed Alberta Williams? Those investigators did more work. They looked more into it specifically because it got more awareness. That needs to be replicated.
Right.
That kind of thing needs to become a phenomenon. And hopefully
and I think
it's starting.
it is.
I think it's starting. I hope it is. We want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Again, that's why we're doing this. We're using our tiny, minuscule little corner of the internet to say, we need to increase awareness on this on a personal level, so that cultural awareness will evolve and that will trickle up to authorities. That's how it has to happen. The only way it will happen, I believe. And then those authorities hopefully will be forced to do their damn job and seek justice for these victims, these women and girls who, it should go without saying, deserve justice and truth as much as anyone else, but they are not getting it. So we need to talk about them and how they're not getting it and make that a problem for the people for whom that needs to be a problem. And I have no illusions that I, am doing anything by saying that per se. But again, hopefully this can be just part of a number of people pushing this issue to the forefront. And among those people are some of course,
what are your sources?
My sources, more of my sources. Aileen Brown at The Intercept, Melissa Hellman at Seattle Weekly, Patrick Riley at the Missoulian, Missoula, Montana, Chelsea Dennis at Nonprofit Quarterly, and Ruth Hopkins at Teen Vogue. And I think there were some others, but those were the ones that I could find again after I read them. So yeah, that was I have a tough couple episodes, I know, and thank you for taking that little journey with us. Again, it's an important topic, so yeah, let's all continue to keep up some awareness of that day to day. That's it. And next week we're gonna be lighter. Specifically, we're gonna do stuff that's
Are
more,
we?
Yes.
Are we though?
Lighter. It won't be so heavy next week. Okay, now you go.
Okay. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that, but all right, here we go.
With aplomb.
A what?
Aplomb.
That doesn't make any sense.
with grace and civility.
Oh.
APLOMB. It's a French cognate.
I don't know.
It's one of those words that we took from a different language and just said, hey, that's ours now.
Like deja vu?
Like so many words.
Like what else? They're mostly French, I feel like. Coup d'etat?
Yes, that is true. The vast majority of English words do come from either French or German, but more of them come from French. Through which, of course, we get all of our Latin influence. But, they say that multisyllabic words are more Latin French influenced, whereas monosyllabic words are more Germanic. So that's what I've always heard.
Oh, that's what I've always heard.
When I've been bantering about etymology.
Just in my own etymological, is that a word? Etymological studies in my...
Of course.
Because I'm a scholar.
And a gentleman.
God damn it. God damn it. Okay.
God damn it.
Let's talk about sleep.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
No.
Let's talk about you.
Let's talk about sleep.
Okay, let's do.
Mario, how much sleep do you get a night?
Not enough.
Because
Typically.
it's really bad for you.
I know.
It's so bad for you.
I feel like I hear or see stories all the time about how, like, we're finding out more about how sleep is important. You need to get enough sleep or you're going to go fucking crazy when you're old.
It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
So my main source was from a TED Talk by a man named Russell Foster.
Uh-huh.
Why Do We Sleep? And he just emphasized a lot how sleep is extremely important. And we sleep for a third of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
If you live to the age of 90, you'll have spent 32 years of your life completely asleep.
If you actually get the, like, 8 hours a night you're supposed to on
Right.
a regular basis. Yeah.
Right.
But, and do we know why we sleep? I mean, is that still basically a mystery, like, in terms of, like, why it's so important?
That's still basically a mystery. Like, there
Okay.
isn't one consensus. Like, we
Mhm.
don't really have one type of idea. But obviously there's lots of theories out there.
Right.
So our main man, Russell Foster, in his TED Talk, he actually talks about how we perceive sleep. And I think this is very important when it comes to figuring out why it's so important and stuff like that. So we don't actually think about sleep much, all right? We see it as something that needs to be cured, almost like it's some type of illness. Like, we're always staying up late to do this, staying up late to do that.
Right. Drinking caffeine.
Drinking caffeine, awake.
Like I was just doing.
The more awake we are, like, the better, the more work we'll get done, and the better motivated that we are, and this, then the other thing. It's not true. It's terrible. We tolerate the need for sleep. But why? It doesn't make any sense. Especially, like you said, that's how we're learning so much more about sleep now, and how good it is for you, and how essential it is for your mental and emotional state, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that people look at it as just a state of relaxation. I mean, it is, but we look at it as though, like, we don't even do that much in our sleep, so why should we make it a priority? But that's not true. There's a whole lot of things happening when you sleep, and some areas of your brain are actually more active than others. So sleep stems from a plethora of interactions within the brain. And so it's essentially turned on and off as a result of all of these interactions. So, and like I'll talk about later, lucid dreaming is like, there's a part of your brain that's active that usually isn't active during sleep. So like dreams, there isn't one agreed upon theory as to why we actually sleep. Here's one. What I'm going to talk about, the restoration idea, and this parallels to the idea that of why we dream is that for, like, evolution, and, like, we're kind of testing ourselves and putting ourselves in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing with the restoration idea, that everything that we've built up during the day is restored and replaced while we sleep. And there are studies to support this. It shows that there are genes within the brain that are only turned on during sleep, and that those genes are associated with restoration and metabolic pathways.
Because I've always heard that your hair grows more quickly when you sleep, and things like that, and that you heal faster when you sleep as well. And is that true? Like, has that been kind of borne out by studies? Did you read that?
I'm not sure. It makes sense.
Right.
That's why you always sleep when you're sick.
Right. Your body is telling you naturally, like, you need to sleep. It has this kind of restorative property to it, right?
Right.
Which to me makes a lot of sense, because you are expelling less energy toward, everything else. So your body can turn inwards and use that energy for its, the lymphatic system or whatever.
Another possible reason is it's good for processing and memory consolidation.
Mm-hmm.
And you tell me this all the time that like
Yeah.
if I'm trying to memorize a monologue or something, you're like, okay, like always say it a couple times before bed and then like get a really good night's rest.
That's what I've heard.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, so it in some sense it may help to sort and then cement this, certain memories that the brain recognizes as being most important.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about cramming for a test.
Mm-hmm.
It's finals week. You have a test the next day that you haven't studied at all.
I never did that.
You're like, bam, all-nighter. We're going to push through it. We're going to do it. We're going to ace this test. Bad idea. Bad idea. If you try to learn a task and then you're deprived of sleep, the learning you did before is totally useless. You're going to forget it. It's going to be locked in your short-term memory and it's going to go away. You're going to panic. You're going to mix things up or get something wrong. You're not going to remember. It's a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Sleep also gives us an advantage when it comes to solving complex problems. And again, it parallels to the dream theory as well, solving problems.
Right.
And it also enhances our creativity in general.
Because I've heard of different instances, like I think there was one like with Tesla, where a person will get like a spontaneous solution to a complex problem in a dream.
Yeah.
They'll like envision it in their dream, and then they'll awake with that still having that understanding.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
That's interesting.
So sleep deprivation is a huge problem in America, and I mean all over the world.
Also a torture technique.
A torture technique? That's reassuring.
Yeah, but I mean, clearly it has known.
You start to like
effects,
hallucinate and shit.
True. Yeah. True.
So 100,000 car accidents a year are attributed to lack of sleep.
Wow.
Yeah. Those who work night shifts, their body clock is off all the time and confused because, and I don't know if you've heard this before, if anybody else has heard this before, but your body clock kind of naturally goes with the light. And so if it's
circadian
light,
rhythm, yeah.
Right. If it's bright outside, your body's saying, oh, this is the time to be awake. And that's why it's bad to stare at your phone before bed or like stand in like a bright ass bathroom and brush your teeth and go straight to the dark plunges of your bedroom. That's what I do every night.
You do both those things.
Bad for you. But yeah, it's not great. It causes poor judgment. It causes bad memory. You're more impulsive. You're likely to make snap decisions.
You know what else you are that's really bad is sleepy.
Yeah.
When you don't sleep.
Great observation by Mario Silva.
The other thing you get, yawny.
Yawny? Is that a new adjective that we have added to the dictionary that consists of you?
Yeah. Yawny's a word, because I said it's a word, and that's how etymology works. Remember we talked earlier about how I'm an etymological expert, I guess.
Okay. Yes, and I'm down.
I don't know if it is a word or not a word, actually, but I use it as a word, so.
I'm yawny. Well, there's just better words to use, like drowsy.
Yeah, but I think yawny is funny, so I use it, because I'm all about the bad humor.
Well, you should.
I'm like a walking Laffy Taffy.
You should probably like switch that perspective because yawny.
Yeah. I should turn it up to 11. You're saying I should do it a lot more
on the funny scale.
I'm gonna keep using it. I will.
You know what?
And yet,
fuck you.
I persisted in my bad comedy. So, thank you.
This is what sleep deprivation gets you, everybody.
Right.
You turn into Mario.
Don't be like me, please.
But
don't be so yawny.
I would like to say that I almost always get my 8 to 10 hours of sleep. I love sleeping. I prioritize sleep. If it's too late and I haven't done my homework, I don't care. I'm going to bed and I'll figure it out tomorrow. Like,
yeah.
When it's bedtime, it's bedtime.
You're good about sleeping, yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
No brag.
Humble brag.
Humble brag. But it's important because lack of sleep has been linked to mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And they're actually physically linked together in the brain. So genes that have been shown to be important for sleep, when they're changed or mutated, those same genes are inclined to cause mental health problems. So there's an actual like physical link between
Interesting.
Mental health and sleep. So if you're going to take anything from this, just change your attitude, okay? Prioritize sleep. It's super important. I mean, not only does it help you, it helps your immune system, helps you fight off disease. You're more susceptible to getting sick the less sleep you have.
Right, and you're not so sleepy.
And God damn it. Getting past the fact that you're not sleepy.
Oh, sorry. I'll get past it.
It's nice. It's just a consequence.
You just feel good, you know.
You just feel better.
You just feel better. It's just better for you. You're a better human.
It's nice to feel awake and like ready to go.
It's nice to be nice.
It's nice to
Keep going. Sorry.
There's a door over there.
That's not nice.
I'll do this podcast by myself. No, I'm just kidding. It would be terrible. There would be a lot of like pauses.
Yeah.
For validation.
Just long pauses.
Be like, oh, no one's laughing at my joke.
Oh no.
All right, moving on.
Okay.
Dream interpretation. Egypt and Greece, dreaming was considered like a divine communication, like supernatural. I know. Shut up. He's mocking me because I'm like waving my hands. Intervention, you know, and they saw it as something with a message that can be interpreted by other people who are associated with these divine things. So
that's like what Joseph and the Great Technicolor Dreamcoder. What is that show called?
Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat?
Yeah. That's what that story's about, right? Joseph, he like goes and interprets the dreams of the Pharaoh, and he makes him like his important
I'm gonna be
100%
honest when I say that I haven't seen that musical since I was a little kid, and I've never even seen it on stage. I saw the Donny Osmond version on like VHS.
Yeah.
So
well, I'm pretty sure that's what it's
can't
about.
really even give you like an accurate.
I'm just supporting
musical.
your position. Like yes, Egypt. Definitely dream interpretation.
Yeah,
for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
Cool.
No doubt.
No doubt. Cool. Noin.
Okay. If you get it, you get it. If you know, you know.
Right.
So yeah, in ancient Egypt, priests were considered dream interpreters, and I think that's kind of true today in the Catholic Church.
Really?
You can like definitely go to confession and like be like, you know, I had this dream, Father. What do you think it means? What do you think God's trying to tell me? And you talk it out, and then you feel better and all warm in your soul.
Right.
In ancient Greece, dreams were seen as omens, as predictions of the future. And a lot of the thing about dream interpretation is that it's a big mystery, and that we'll just never know. And that's why I think it's interesting what other cultures and what other people say about it, and how one thing could mean something for you, but it could mean something totally different for somebody else.
Right.
And that's actually why you can't really rely on like what your dream means, like Flipbook, and like it's totally different for everybody. And so dream interpretation dates back centuries, and obviously it spans cultures all over the world. So in what is believed to be the first piece of literature written ever, do you know the answer?
I don't think so. What is it?
The Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, right, Gilgamesh.
I was you know that. Has numerous accounts of the prophetic power of dreams. It's definitely a theme.
And that's from like Persia, right? Or from Babylonia, like.
I don't know. I think it's like 31.
Maybe it was Babylonia.
BC? or not 3100 BC, Mesopotamia.
Oh, Mesopotamia. Okay.
It's Mesopotamia. 2100 BC.
And it was in Sumerian. Okay.
Right. Where's my thing? Okay. So, in more modern context, there's dream dictionaries. So, a dream dictionary is a tool made for interpreting like actual images that you see in your dream. So, it talks about like specific images and specific scenarios, and they're attached to certain interpretations. But like I said before, they're not really considered scientifically viable within the psychology community because it's subjective, it's interpretive.
Yeah. There's no way to test it, so it's not really scientific.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So sometimes people have similar dreams, like being naked in public or being chased, falling off a cliff.
Right. There's these like kind of universal types of dreams.
Teeth falling out, stuff like that. I've
Right.
actually never had that dream.
I've had that dream.
I've never had that.
I
I've
do
had
remember
like
that.
the actor dream where like, oh my God, you're like in a show.
All
You're
the
not
time
in
I have that.
you're not in costume and you don't know your lines and you're on next.
Mine, it's weird. Mine, it's usually like I'm in a show, but then I'm on stage in a different show where I don't know my lines.
That's weird.
It's strange, but it's usually that form, like where I'm on stage, but I don't know my lines. But everyone seems like pretty like okay with it. It's never like that stressful either. I don't know.
What? Mine's like backstage panic. Like, what? Wait, what? What show is this? What? I don't even know like where my costume is. Like, am I next? What do you mean I'm next? I don't know what I'm doing. Like, where am I?
I have kind of a recurring one actually. I forget what show it's with, but it's like the same every time. It's weird.
What is it?
I forget. You
I know.
But why do you forget your dreams? Well, I guess it's because you're not making like long-term memories when you're dreaming, right?
We don't really know.
That's kind of another mystery, like why you usually forget them so quickly.
Yeah.
Or because you have many dreams throughout the night, but then you don't remember most of them anyway, right?
Right.
It's so weird.
So on the opposite spectrum of dreams, nightmares.
Uh-huh.
So nightmares can be caused by many things. Stress, just general conflict, fear, most commonly and most severely trauma. Those with PTSD have extreme nightmares. It's paired with emotional problems. It can also be a side effect of medication or just
Right.
general drug abuse as well. You can have nightmare disorders. It can be linked with other illnesses and stuff like that. It's experienced during the REM phase, rapid eye movement, the deepest part of sleep.
Mhm.
And so thinking about difficult issues and trying to sort them out is a theory of why we have nightmares. So it goes with the theory that we've mentioned before, which you said you liked this theory the most, of why we dream, that our body tests us out and prepares us for real life dangerous situations.
Right.
And the amygdala is highly active during REM sleep, and the amygdala has a large role in handling negative emotions like fear, like stress, like aggression. And the brain works differently during REM sleep. So like certain parts of the brain are dormant while others are highly active. So trauma and personality type have a huge role in who has more nightmares, and it's likely because unresolved conflicts don't go away. It's something
Right.
that will never really leave you.
They're like a ghost, you have unfinished business. You're going to stay roaming around.
Right.
It's like the ghost of that trauma is still like recurring inside your brain.
Yeah. So a 2014 study published in Sleep Journal showed that blind people have 4 times more nightmares than those with vision.
I remember you telling me
Right,
that.
it's
That's
interesting.
so weird.
So this confirms like an already existing hypothesis that people's nightmares are associated with emotions that they experience while they're awake. So blind people may not have any like predisposition to nightmares, like over like sighted people, but they just happen to have more more to worry about and more negative experiences built into their everyday lives. So the study tested 11 people who were born blind, 14 who had become blind, and 25 who had still retained their sight. And then they asked them to record their dreams over a period of 4 weeks. And those who were born blind had the most nightmares. But on a good note, on a better note, once they were told the results, the people who were born blind were surprised. They were like, "Oh, I hadn't known that. I hadn't really realized that I had more nightmares than anybody else," and it didn't affect them. It wasn't something that was affecting their daily lives.
Right.
So
it was just part of their normal experience.
It was just something that happened, which I thought was really interesting.
Because I think nightmares, it's like they're not that affecting. I mean, sometimes certain ones, but typically you get over that nightmare very quickly and forget about it.
It's very rare to have like a wake up and think about, oh my God, that was a nightmare.
That reminds me
did you just remember one?
No, well, a Twilight Zone episode about a recurring nightmare that this guy had. It was driving him insane, where he was on trial every night for murder. And he would go through the whole thing, the whole trial, the whole sentencing. He would sit on death row, and then at the very end of the dream, he would be executed every night. And it was just driving him fucking crazy,
Yeah.
And it was and the episode it centers around, if I recall correctly, him going to a psychiatrist. And I won't give away how it ends, but it's one of the good ones. They're all pretty good, but it's one of the really good ones.
Twilight Zone is on Netflix.
Oh, certain episodes are, yeah.
Oh, it's not all of them?
No, it's not. It's that weird thing where it's random episodes.
Yeah, Hulu does the same thing, and I'm over here missing out on The Good Place.
I'm assuming it's a consequence of various rights holders and their various, whatever. I don't know.
When will it all change?
Never.
What's the another mundane mystery? What's the future of cable television and streaming services?
Right. Predictive mysteries.
Speaking of predictiveness, let's talk about lucid dreaming.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Have you ever I've only lucid dreamt once, and it was on accident.
Right, we talked about it last time.
Yeah.
I recall having done it when I was a kid, maybe more than once, but since I was a child.
So, lucid dreaming, a dream in which the dreamer is aware that they are, in fact, dreaming.
Right. Have control over it.
Research has shown that it's accompanied by an increased activation of parts of the brain, like I said before, that are normally suppressed when you're sleeping. So, it represents a brain state between REM sleep and being awake, which is kind of weird. And it's kind of another state of consciousness, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So, in Eastern thought, pursuing the dreamer's ability to be aware that they're dreaming is really important in both the Tibetan Buddhist practice of dream yoga and the ancient Indian Hindu practice of yoga nidra. So, it's also a common practice among early Buddhists. So lucid dreaming as well spans time and culture. In 1968, a woman named Celia Green, a British writer on psychology, analyzed the main characteristics of lucid dreams. So she concluded that lucid dreams were actually a category of experience that was actually quite distinct from ordinary dreams. She said they were associated with rapid eye movement, and that she was also the first to link lucid dreams to the phenomenon of false awakenings.
Right.
False awakenings, I actually didn't know this. It's a vivid and convincing dream about awakening from sleep when in reality you're not actually awake.
Right. You get kind of caught in between. And then sometimes it's associated with seeing a shadowy figure standing in front of you. It's like a psychological phenomenon that occurs with certain people.
Along with lucid dreaming is night terrors.
Right.
And sleep paralysis. Now, night terrors...
Sleep paralysis is more what I was just talking about, yeah.
Yes. Night terrors usually happen between children.
Mm-hmm.
Generally between the ages of 7 7 to 12, sometimes younger, sometimes a little bit older. It kind of depends. But it's basically extreme nightmares that make you sweat, make you move, screaming, becomes much more physical.
Right.
And sleep paralysis is when, okay, so the best way I can describe it is knowing that you're like in this, knowing that you're sleeping and wanting to get up and wake up because there's this like feeling of dread, but you can't.
Right. I think almost everyone has had this experience at least once.
Right.
Sometimes you feel a weight on your chest, but it's always that sense of immobility and
Yeah.
wanting to wake up but not being able to, wanting to say something but not being able to. It's very distressing.
Yeah.
And there are some people, unfortunately, who deal with it on a recurring basis because of certain
Wow.
psychological, factors or whatever. I'm not really sure why it happens exactly, but yeah,
Yeah.
some people it's like an issue. Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I have on dreams, lucid dreaming, nightmares, dream interpretation, sleep,
Cool. That was, yeah, you covered a lot of topics.
the mystery of this whole other state of consciousness that we really don't, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it is still pretty mysterious.
It's weird that we don't know.
It's one
It's
of those
just this
things,
big part of
yeah,
our life.
You'd think people would have figured it out by now.
Yeah.
But no, not really.
So my sources, like I said, Russell Foster, Why Do We Sleep TED Talk, Medical Daily article written by Chris Weller, a Medical Daily article written by Lizette Borelli, Dream Interpretation wiki page, Lucid Dream wiki page, and WebMD facts about dreaming.
Key.
What's next?
Weird shit in the news.
Weird shit in the news.
Weird.
That was terrible harmonization.
Well, it wasn't supposed to be like beautiful or anything.
It wasn't?
No.
That's what I was trying to go for.
Sorry, Miranda.
Oh my goodness.
So I've got like a bunch of weird shit in the news, so
Why
I'm
don't you
gonna
pick
do a
your
little
favorite
bit.
one?
I'm gonna pick my favorite couple. So this is the one I was gonna do last time. I like it. So it's a BBC News article. World War I grenade among potatoes at Hong Kong crisp factory.
It looks like a brain.
A little bit, yeah. It's a very old It's from World War I. Hand grenade. Apparently, the pin was pulled out, but it just never went off. So it's like been active for like 100 years or something.
I hate that.
It's dangerous, right? And of course, this is there's a lot of unexploded ordnance that around the world. It's like a big issue. The other one I wanted to do also involves Hong Kong. Weirdly, from CNN by Sarah Lazarus. Why is this high-rise city being invaded by wild boars? So apparently, I didn't really realize this, but the island of Hong Kong is mostly unincorporated, and it's only like a strip along the coast that is this like super modern, built up, dense
Ooh.
metropolis that we know as Hong Kong, right? One of the biggest cities in the
Yep.
world, a city-state. So apparently, though, because of things like their habitat being built up into and things of that nature, wild boars over the past few years have been regularly wandering into the city and eating from the trash and wandering through the streets.
Oh my god.
I didn't realize this, but some of these fucking boars, okay, these are serious fucking boars. They can be up to 440 pounds.
No.
And reach 6.5 feet in length.
What?
That's what the story says.
That shit will kill you.
They are dangerous, but thankfully
I wonder
they're
if they
also
taste
pretty
good.
docile. Probably.
That was in poor taste. I'm sorry.
Or maybe it was in good taste. We don't know, right? Anyway, so thankfully there have only been 10 recorded cases of these wild boars injuring people since 2014, but the story does note that half of those cases occurred in the last year. So it's a
What
growing
happened?
issue.
That sounds like some climate change shit.
I don't know. It's kind of a mystery actually as to why it's happening exactly now.
Like the polar bears in Russia.
But clearly these boars do not have the same fear of humans as they once did. Like this one person describes like that they used to just be able to like clap at them basically and yell. That doesn't work anymore. Now instead of them running away, she's running away. Literally, she
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
"Yeah, clearly I'm more afraid of them than they are of me now." So, and the power dynamics have shifted between the people and the boars in Hong Kong. Just to let you know,
Oh my
newsflash:
God. That's
the
so
boars are fucking winning.
That's so scary.
So anyway,
Team Boar.
right? Yeah, I for one welcome our new boar overlords.
I think it's time we have a new change of
Oh Jesus!
most powerful species.
Right. Clearly, the boars are ascendant.
I nominate cats.
Cats would do a good job. They're clear-headed.
Or mice.
Right.
Like
well,
hitchhikers.
I was gonna say, yeah, they're the projections into our realm of the super
The
intelligent
world
blue or
world
whatever.
makers.
Right. Anyway, that's my weird shit in the news. What do you got for us?
I just have one.
Okay.
And it's about a doggy.
Ooh.
So
doggy.
in actually a big dog.
Oh, okay.
A pit bull.
Uh-huh.
So in New York,
Mhm.
in let me see, in Westchester County.
Uh-huh.
So a pit bull slipped out of a home, broke through the yard's fence, and ended up roaming around the neighborhood, barking loudly,
Uh-huh.
just trying to get people's attention. So it led to a call to the police, and then when they showed up, the dog's name is Sadie. She took off. So they ran, they chased her, and she led them towards the house. And once they got there, they saw that the door was open and that there was the smell of gas. And so they evacuated everybody, and they found that there was a gas leak in the basement.
Oh shit.
So this dog was like, "Oh shit, something's wrong. What do I do? Better go tell everybody
Right.
and save my people." So shout out to Sadie.
Smart dog.
Smart dog. And they know that, like, they're confident of this because they've had her for 11 years and she's never, like, ran away like this before.
Mhm.
Like, it was very out of character. So
Right. Clearly Sadie knew what she was doing.
very happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Some good shit in the news.
Save the day.
You saved the day, Sadie.
All right. This
Okay.
has been an episode.
This certainly has.
Team Mystery. All right. Ooh, yeah. Ooh.
Well,
Ooh,
thank you guys for listening to us. Listening to our weird sounds that we make.
Yes, thank you for listening. Follow us on all the social media, especially Twitter. Hit us up on Twitter,
Uh-huh.
On Instagram, Facebook. I'm getting a call.
You can call us, I guess, if you know our
No, you
number,
fucking can't.
and then we'll hang
Don't
up on
call
you
us.
like we just hung up on that scammer.
I mean, I get probably 2 to 3 robocalls a day. It's terrible.
I know, right? Mario Text 30. That's my tweeter. So tweeter at me, and at Murdery Thingy, I think, is our regular one.
Every time you say tweeter, a millennial
An angel
dies.
gets its wings. Is that the same person?
Yes. So we're gonna stop. Okay, guys. Thanks for listening.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.